Welcome to the InfoSec Insider podcast, brought to you by URM, the UK's leading information and cybersecurity specialists.
Hi, my name's Annie and I'm here today with Frazer Grudgings, who's one of our senior consultants here at URM. Welcome to another episode of InfoSec Insider. So today Frazer and I are going to be talking about ISO 27002. So just to start things off, Frazer, would you mind explaining what ISO 27002 is?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Annie. So the first thing to point out is ISO 27002, it's actually a guidance standard rather than a certification requirements standard, with the ending in 2 rather than a 1. That's the sort of main sort of differentiator. But it's designed to work alongside ISO 27001, and it's very useful for an organization if they want some sort of practical guidance on how to implement the Annex A controls that are listed in the 27001 standard. It doesn't cover what we call the mandatory clauses, so clauses 4 through to 10 that are standard in all the ISO standards. It just purely focuses on the Annex A controls, and it offers guidance, a little bit more insight. It provides a bit more context around each of those controls to help a business determine which ones are relevant, to their sort of information security needs, and helps them determine the right approach to creating their information security management system. As with all the standards, it's designed to be applicable to all organizations, different types, sizes. So you don't have to be a particular business that's focused on IT. As an example, you can be doing anything at all. It's still relevant to you in that respect.
So I've heard of the term attributes in relation to ISO 27002 before. So can you tell me what the attributes are and what their purpose is?
Yeah, I can certainly sort of try and distill a myth there around that. So if we think about the controls themselves, they're split into 4 themes, or families as I tend to call them. There's ones around people, so you sort of traditional HR controls there. There's controls around physical security, how you access your premises, how you store data, etc. Technological ones are the more sort of IT focused, how you protect your IT estate, your business systems. And then there's the organizational ones, which kind of wrap up everything else. But what ISO 27002 has introduced is these things called attributes. And there's essentially 5 attributes to every single control. Those 5 are, if I run through the list quickly, they're control types, there's information security properties, there's cybersecurity concepts, operational capabilities, and security domains. And in terms of the purpose of these attributes, I guess, in the simplest way, it offers organizations 5 more ways of reviewing each control and identifying where that control has some of applicability to their business. So rather than just saying, okay, it's a people control or a technological control, that might be still posing a few problems for businesses to try and determine, well, which one of these controls fits our business better. So the attributes provide another 5 ways of determining, whether that control is relevant to your business or relevant to your approach to risk or your organizational goals. It just gives you that little bit more context in terms of, how to separate which control is relevant. So if I talk about the control types attribute to begin with, this is kind of focused on the control in terms of its nature and its action. And an example of that may be if an organization has an information security incident, and they may be trying to determine which of the controls will help them prevent those kind of incidents happening, or detect if an incident is about to happen, or then correct an incident when it does happen. And the attributes within the control types section gives the organization a better understanding the position they need to be in to sort of prevent or detect or respond to an incident. So it can help an organization say, okay, well, we only really need to focus on these set of controls because they respond to our needs. We want to be in a position to prevent information security incidents. Some businesses may say, actually, we're happy to just correct an incident when it occurs. It just depends on how they perceive it in terms of a risk. So it allows them to say, okay, well, we will focus on control attributes that are centered around correcting issues or correcting incidents when they occur. So it just gives that little bit of extra context in terms of how a business may apply certain controls. The second one is the information security properties attribute. And this is very much aligned to the principles, the fundamental security principles of information security, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, the CIM sort of holy trinity, as we class it. And that allows a business, again, to sort of determine which controls are centered more on the confidentiality side of things or on the availability side. So again, if their risk assessment or their risk posture is, we actually want to protect things in terms of the integrity of our information, well, then they would naturally look towards the control attributes that are focused on those kind of areas. The third one is cybersecurity concepts. So that is aligned to the NIST cybersecurity framework, so the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and it helps an organization map which controls fit within different phases of cybersecurity, such as identifying potential cybersecurity threats or protecting, again, detecting or responding or recovering once a cybersecurity incident has occurred. So the common theme is it's giving businesses more opportunity to determine where their focus lies within the controls, rather than trying to say, okay, we will implement every single control wholesale. It just gives you that little extra bit of context in terms of determining which ones meet your particular needs. The fourth one, operational capabilities attribute. Again, it's providing that context around the controls. So a business might want to look at what activities they do in terms of governance that they have around information security, asset management, how their supplier relationship security is actually structured, their business continuity or their service continuity, or legal and compliance areas, or, as we've touched on, incident management and information security assurance. So if these different elements of that attribute sort of ring bells within the organization and go, yeah, we are very much focused on our assets, then it will help you determine the controls that are there as a best practice in terms of implementation of your information security management system. The final one, security mains attribute, that provides like a comprehensive approach to information security activities around different measures that you might have for defense against threats, recovery strategies, management of your security practices, both internally and externally. And those measures, once you've identified them, can help an organization in terms of prevention of data loss, implementing different layers of security defenses within your business systems to sort of prevent yourself from cybersecurity attacks. And it puts you in a position to be able to recover more effectively or quickly when you've had disruptions. So the key thing I've interpreted, from these attributes is it provides different layers for businesses to interpret the control, and that may then help them implement it rather than looking at it from the different, the four themes that the controls are structured into. So it can be very useful. It just depends on how the business is structured. So where I worked at previously, they were quite risk averse. It was more a case of what will that cost us, the correction approach. So they wouldn't necessarily have been too focused on the preventative or the detect elements, of these attributes. So as the information security manager, that was quite helpful for me to structure how I would feed back to senior management. I would know they're not necessarily interested in the detail of the control. They just want to know, these are the things that we've got in place that are aligned to our business approach or their business goals. their risk strategy in that respect. So yeah, that's how I would sort of summarize, in terms of what the attributes are and the purpose of them.
And are there some different ways to use ISO 27002? Like, what are the different ways that organisations can make use of the standard?
Yeah, I've sort of picked out 4 that sort of ring true to myself. Obviously, as we touched on at the start, the main purpose of the 27002 standard is a guidance standard to help businesses implement an ISO 27001 compliant information security management system. And where that helps in terms of the guidance is, for example, you've got, I think, the first control within the organizational theme, 5.1, is around information security policy and topic specific policies. Now, a lot of clients that I've worked with, they're kind of unsure what is meant by topic specific policies. They understand the need to have an information security policy, but the topic specific, sort of, we're not too sure. Well, if they have a copy of the 27002 standard, it gives some examples of other policies that might be relevant to that particular control. So things like access control, asset management, your backup policy, how systems are backed up, your information security event management policy. So straight away, it gives a clear indicator of the sort of things that businesses should be looking at and considering, in terms of that particular control. So it's really helpful, in terms of its use there. Another great way it can be used is if you are internally auditing or an external auditor. The structure of the 27002 standard, in terms of the guidance, it provides auditors to develop different types of questions, particularly useful if the auditee is struggling a little bit in terms of how they've interpreted the control requirement, and how to sort of fully implement that so that it's advantageous, to their business and their ISMS. So the standard offers a number of ways of saying, okay, you could implement this control in this way, and then businesses go, oh yeah, that rings true to us. That actually makes more sense. So that can be very beneficial in terms of the usage there. Another way is in terms of continual improvement. So obviously that's something that is a prominent part of all the ISO standards, is continual improvement of your systems, your management systems. And within the 27002 standard, there's sections on other information, which is very useful. So if a business has implemented a management system, it's certified, and then maybe they're coming up to a recertification audit, so maybe 3 years down the line, they're looking for ways to sort of show that the system is matured, it's improving. They can look at the other information section within that standard, and they can think, oh, actually, yeah, we didn't consider that this control would cover those areas. Let's look at that, and that naturally then becomes an improvement that you can talk about, with auditors. You can measure how that's being implemented in terms of its success. And the final piece, in terms of ways of it being used, is the attributes themselves. As I've mentioned before, they provide a different way of viewing the controls. So sitting outside of the 4 themes. So as we mentioned, businesses may be struggling to sort of interpret or implement all of the controls within the organizational side or the technological controls, because there's 30 plus in each of those families, as I call them, and they might be thinking, crikey, do we need to implement all of these? So one way of looking at it differently is through the attributes, and those 5 extra layers can provide a little insight as to whether, yes, we do need to implement all of them, or actually no, we don't. We only need to implement half of these, because they're focused more on what we're trying to achieve as a business, which is our priority in terms of a business goal is our maintaining our risk position, or it may be that that a key element is to or key operational goal is to protect customer data. So through the attributes, they can identify in more detail the controls that are aligned to that, and then that's what they can set as a priority. So it will make their management system probably easier to implement overall, but probably a lot more effective in the long run in terms of monitoring and measurement and demonstrating that it's meeting the business needs as well as performing to the ISO standards needs. So yeah, that'd be my 4 sort of top uses of the 27002 standard.
Thank you, Frazer. I think, all the advice I hear about ISO 27001, something that keeps popping up every time is use ISO 27002. It's just always at the top of people's lists in terms of advice to, ease that implementation process.
It is. It's certainly since I've been reviewing it, the change from 2013 to 2022. There's a lot of emphasis, on the 27002 standard as well, because of the introduction of the attributes. But it actually makes a lot of sense. I would recommend, that each client buys both versions of the standard, because it is just, particularly if you're implementing, you're on that journey. It does give you a more rounded approach to each of the controls, and a lot of practical guidance is in there as well. So it's not necessarily all heavily jargon based like some of the requirement standards can be, or quite open ended in terms of what the requirement standards say. You must implement this. It's like, well, what is this? Well, the 27002 standard gives you lots of examples of what that can be. So it's extremely helpful.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for your time, Frazer. And to our listeners that want to learn more about ISO 27002, please go look at ISO 27002, The Unsung Hero, which is a blog that Frazer has written on our website, urmconsulting.com. Just gives some more detail, goes into a really deep dive about ISO 27002. So yeah, go check that out, and thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could spare a moment to leave a rating or review at ratethispodcast.com/InfoSec Insider. To listen to more episodes, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Podbean.
Thank you for listening to URM's InfoSec Insider podcast. For more information, visit our website at urmconsulting.com.